Sorry, that was me.
All right.
That's great. Thanks.
Bought that 54 Moody you can see in the center of the screen in California, and spent 4 years on the west coast of Central America and across the Pacific, Galapagos, Marquesas, Tahiti and Fiji, 2 years in Fiji and then back home. And that was time to go back to work. And we decided that we didn't really want to go back to work. So we thought we'd start running these yacht rallies and see if we could get enough money for anti-foul and some beer. So that's how it's all begun. So we ran the first of our Downunder rallies back in 2015. And since then, we've made the crossing back from Australia to Fiji 5 times each year, again, prior to COVID. So we're looking forward to resuming that again next year in 2023. So that's, and that was on that catamaran you can see down in that bottom corner. So I've been involved in New Caledonia. We've cruised there ourselves many times. And I'm now involved with New Caledonia Tourism, and I've passed some of their training and been accredited as a tourism professional, as they call it. And so I've got some credentials, and I do know a lot about the country, and I've got some great access to support from them as a result. So if we're going to head off to New Caledonia and we're going to go with our boat, we need to know a few little things about how long we can stay and do we need a visa. So for Australian and New Zealand citizens that wish to go to New Caledonia, you don't need to apply for a visa in advance. You'll be granted a 90-day visa on arrival. However, you'll be required to exit the country within 90 days of your arrival. So you can return at any time and use the unused period of that first 90 days. So if you happen to fly home for 2 weeks and then went back, you wouldn't have lost that 2 weeks. But you can't stay for any more than 180 days in a 365-day period. So that means that if you are there for 90 days, you've got to be out of the country for 90 days before you can go back for another 90 days. And this is particularly relevant when you're trying to plan your cruising season over there. Of course, you need to make sure your passport's got 6 months before the expiration date. And as of January 2019, you had to have proof of travel insurance to cover medical repatriation and any emergencies. Another thing that people don't realize is if you had friends that were going to fly over and meet you there and come cruising, and they came with a one-way ticket. So that was, they didn't purchase a return ticket when they left to go to New Caledonia. They had only a one-way ticket. You'll need to get a letter from the Department of Immigration in New Caledonia acknowledging that they are coming to stay on your boat. Otherwise, they likely won't be allowed to get on the plane. So if you head off to New Caledonia and then you want your friends to fly over, or your family is flying over, or you've got crew flying over to come back with you, you need to make sure that if they're coming in on a one-way ticket, you've arranged for a one-way letter to show at the airport. Otherwise, they won't get on their plane. And if you really like it over there and you want to stay for longer, you can actually apply for a long stay visa through the French consulate in Sydney. You need to get that done very early, and it is quite a process. And to date, no one's been successful in actually getting one because it took so long they gave up. But it can be done. When you go overseas with your boat, it becomes a foreign flagged vessel in another port, and you need to get a cruising permit to allow you to visit the country with your boat. And there's rules and regulations that go around that, such as the vessel can only stay in New Caledonia for a maximum of 1 year in any 3-year period without having to be imported. So if you were there for 6 months, say, this year and 6 months the next year, you would have used 12 months and you wouldn't be able to go the following year. So at the end of the following year, the clock would reset and you could start to go again. So again, it's just worth knowing that there are rules and regulations about having your boat in a foreign country and what you are allowed to do and how long it can stay. So it's important to research those sorts of things before you go. So Vanuatu, again, same thing. Australian and New Zealand passport holders will get a 30-day visa on arrival, and further extensions can be obtained once you're in the country, and you can get extensions for up to 12 months. So it's a little bit more lenient there, and you do have the ability to stay a bit longer. Again, same thing with a passport, and the same thing with the one-way letter. And vessels can stay in Vanuatu for 18 months in any period of 24 months without having to be imported. So it's the thing to realize here is it's different in each country, and you've got to research those rules. Thanks, Viki. So if we're going to sail to New Caledonia and we're going to leave from, say, the Gold Coast, how far is it and how long will it take? So it's 780 nautical miles from Southport to Noumea if you can sail the rum line. And how long it's going to take will depend on how fast you sail. So you can see there, if you've got a boat that's doing 5 knots, about 6.5 days. And if you've got a boat that's doing 8 knots, around about 4 days. So it's all about boat speed and, of course, the weather. So the route, and this is previous, our last Go East rally that we ran in 2019. You can see the boats have left Australia and sailed across to New Caledonia. It's quite a fuzzy mess there. This is the predict wind tracking setup that we have, satellite tracking, that we can track all the vessels when they're at sea. So they've all sailed off from the Gold Coast to New Caledonia, and then the majority of them have gone on and sailed through the Vanuatu group from south to north. And then some have chosen to spend the cyclone season up in the Solomon Islands, and you can see those 2 boats that have headed off up the top there, and it looks like they've never come back, which they have. And then the other option, which we're going to talk about with Viki, is to sail down to New Zealand and then get ready to spend the next cruising season further out into the Pacific. Or you can simply just sail back to Australia. The key thing to realize, we have a lot of people say, oh, I want to go to Fiji, I want to go to Fiji. And if they haven't been to Vanuatu and New Caledonia, it really makes sense to first sail from Australia to Vanuatu, to New Caledonia and Vanuatu, and then sail down to New Zealand and have the boat based there ready for the next cruising season to be able to go out and spend time in Tonga and Fiji. There's a lot to see and do in Tonga and Fiji, especially Fiji. People tend to be there for months and months. And if you're trying to do it all in 1 year, go from Australia to Fiji and then come back and see Vanuatu and New Caledonia, it's just, you'll never really do anything justice. You'll be sailing the whole time and not getting to experience everything that there is on offer. So if you can split it up and do it over a period of a couple of years. And the other reason, of course, is it's very difficult, and I know from experience, to sail from Australia direct to Fiji. And even trying to go from New Caledonia to Fiji is challenging, primarily because we've got trade winds, and the trade winds are anywhere from the east to southeast. And if you look at the angle of sail when you're leaving New Caledonia there, the yellow line that extends almost off the screen, and you're trying to head to Fiji, you can see that you're sort of heading east northeast. So if you have got easterlies or southeasterlies, east southeasterlies, which is what you're typically going to have, it's a hard passage. And it's about 800 nautical miles again if you can sail the rum line. So much better to break the voyage up and do it over 2 years and experience the whole of the Pacific, or the Southwest Pacific anyway. Thanks, Viki. So New Caledonia. If you're going to go and visit New Caledonia and cruise, you've got a great experience ahead of you, because you've got 2 completely separate cultures. You've got the French culture, which Noumea is often referred to as Paris in the Pacific, and you've got all of the lovely foods and wines and the culture that goes with the French and their passion for food and all things lovely. So, the city has got a lot of that to offer, a lot of French flair, and, French is the spoken language. So you really do feel like you've just arrived in a whole nother country, which you have, of course, but it's quite a stark experience. Having just come back from there on Sunday, and was the first time we'd been back there for nearly 3 years, I've forgotten just how French it is, and how sometimes you can't communicate unless you can carry some French. So it is truly an international experience with a whole nother language. Thanks, Viki. The next part of it is the Kanak culture, and these are the original people of New Caledonia, and they have their own ideals and their own way of life, and their own languages, and it's a whole contrast to that of the French. So it's important to identify that you've got two distinct cultures here, and to honor those cultures, and respect their customs. The Kanaks are particularly, it's particularly important to understand the Kanak culture and the gesture of costume, or costume as they call it, which means, there's a lot to explain, but just to give you some idea, when we're sailing around in Australia and we pull up in an anchorage and we just go ashore and enjoy the beach and fish and do all the things that we like to do, when you're doing that in New Caledonia, if you're doing that in the islands, you're basically anchoring in someone's backyard, and you're fishing in their fishing spot, where they actually rely on that fishing spot to feed their families and their whole village. And unlike Australia, they actually have the rights to that water below the high tide mark and quite some way out into the bay. And it's their home and it's their backyard, and you can't just stop there and expect to just do what you like. It's important to go ashore and announce yourself and perform a gesture called kochum, where you will visit with the chief and you'll make a gesture of a gift, and then you'll be welcomed. And once you're welcome, you are truly welcome, and you'll be considered part of that community right up until the time that you move on. And you'll need to do that in each of these destinations you arrive at, because there's a different chief. There can be, on one island, there can be 4 or 5 different chiefs, and sometimes one kochum is sufficient, but other times you need to do it 2 or 3 times, depending on where you're visiting, such as Ovea in the Loyalty Islands. So again, it's very important to be aware of these customs and the culture, and ensure that you leave a clean wake for everyone behind you by following those requirements, if you like. Thanks, Vic. So New Caledonia cruising, once we've spent our time exploring Noumea and getting full on French baguettes and cheese and wine, we can head off cruising. And the really exciting part about New Caledonia, if you can see on the screen there, is that there's an outer barrier fringing reef that covers the whole western coast of New Caledonia and about a third of the east coast, or 2/3 of the east coast, which means that once you've entered from the ocean, you've come into reef passes. If any of you have been up to the Great Barrier Reef and cruised into Lady Musgrave Lagoon, you have a pass that takes you into that lagoon. Well, these reef passes are scattered all along that west coast of New Caledonia. And once you've entered into those various reef passes, you can sail inside the outer barrier reef for hundreds of miles, literally. So you're out of the ocean swell. You're essentially in a bay, and you're not getting the roll that comes from the ocean swell. It's very sheltered, and it's pretty much all weather sailing, which is exciting. The other part about it that's exciting, if you look down at the bottom of that screen, you can see Isle Ile-de-Pin, which is a group of islands down there in the southern province. But to the left of that, you'll see that there's the barrier reef extends way down to the left of Ile-de-Pin, and in that cluster of reef there, away from the mainland, is hundreds, and I say literally hundreds, of isolated islands that are uninhabited, that have got anchorages either side of them and fringing reefs of their own that fringe the islands. And you can cruise down there we haven't seen probably half of them, and we've spent a lot of time down there. You can cruise down there forever, and it's very, very remote and very pristine. Of course, the lagoon is UNESCO heritage listed, so it's a particularly pristine environment to be in. And whilst it is a marine park, you can still enjoy it without too many restrictions. So yeah, it is a stunning cruising ground in its own right, and 3 months won't even scratch the surface. So that's why we've been back there many times. A few photos there to give you an idea of what you're looking at. At the top left-hand side, you're looking at Ovea in the Loyalty Islands, and then over here we're at a little island just down in the southern, inside the bottom corner of the southern lagoon, or the southern part of the mainland, I should say. The fishing, as you can see, is great. We've got all the boats anchored off the resort there, and you can see the overwater bungalows. So you've got that real Tahitian style experience there where you can go ashore and enjoy the resort and, you know, wander around there with the overwater bungalows that people are paying $1,000 a night to stay in or more. And really, you know, feel like you're in an exotic place, which you are. The walking trails, the mainland is sparsely inhabited, so there's a lot of lovely walks, and most of those walks feature waterfalls or ponds that you can swim in, and you can do all this from the boat. It's very easy to anchor the boat and go ashore with a tender and, you know, go on these walks and experience these things. And of course, if you're a surfer, some of the best surfing breaks along the edges of that lagoon, and there's dozens of them, and that's just one there at past Dumbia. Thanks, Vic. So by contrast, if we go to Vanuatu, it's more about the people than it is the cruising. Because it's not got the barrier reef fringe lagoon, most of the anchorages are what we would call open roadstead anchorages, meaning that they're open to the ocean swell. And, you know, they're very weather dependent as to where you can go and when you can go. That's not to say there isn't some that are very sheltered and are all weather, but the majority of them you'll find will be open roadstead, and you'll need to choose your anchorages and your cruising schedule based around when those anchorages are going to be comfortable. But the people you're going to experience in Vanuatu are, I've always said that it's literally like going to another world. It's hard to comprehend that, you know, 1,000 kilometers away from Australia, there are people that are living such a different life to us, and they are so welcoming and so humble, and so much want you to experience their way of life, and they ask nothing in return. So you've got the volcano there at Mount Yasua to visit down at Tanna, which is an extraordinary experience. You can see those people are standing actually on the rim of a live, active volcano that isn't fenced. It's quite daunting and quite breathtaking at the same time. So yeah, there's really some wonderful experiences to have in Vanuatu. I've got to be careful that I don't talk all night about these destinations, but there's plenty to see and do, and you'll certainly, if you're away for, you know, typically people leave Australia in May or June in their boats and return to Australia in October to coincide with the cyclone season. So you've really only got 4 or 5 months to pack as much in as you can, and there's plenty to pack in. Thanks, Vic. So it's more of the Vanuatu people experiences. They're doing festivals there all the time. We've got the water music festivals. We've got if you're able to get up into the top of Vanuatu before the end of June or middle of June, you're able to go on to Pentecost Island and see the land diving. The reason they don't do it all year round is the roots, the vines that they use to do the diving tend to dry out and aren't quite so limber and could have a not so good landing if they're not careful. So it's, again, you've got to find out when things are on and where you can be and what you can see, but there is plenty of cultural experiences to be had. If you are going to go, you must have these cruising guides, and I say that and you think that I'm trying to sell them, and I'm not. I'm saying to you that if you are going to go, you will have a far better experience and see so much more as a result of having these guides on board. They're an electronic guide, they're not a printed guide, and they contain thousands of satellite images and thousands of waypoints and sailing routes and information about anchorages and what's ashore and what's to see and do and where to get groceries and where to get parts for your boat, and literally anything that you could imagine that you're going to need to know is in these guides. Of course, if you happen to be one of our Downunder Rally members, and Viki will probably also say the same there, you will get discounts on these guides if you were to purchase them through us. But regardless, if you're going, you need to have them. So that's the Rocket Cruising Guides. So the other thing you're going to need to do is prepare the vessel and crew. And there are a couple of things that you'll need to know straight up, and these can be enough of a deterrent for people not to go. And the first one is that the vessel's going to need to be Australian registered. That's completely different and separate to your state registration. So you have to apply to the AMSA and get the vessel on the Australian Shipping Register, and it's quite a process. And depending upon how many owners the boat's had, how old it is, what side of, whether it was a production boat or a non-production boat, will determine how much effort this is going to take and how long it's going to take you to do it. The cost isn't extreme. It's about $1,600 odd to go through the process, and it's not an annual fee. So once you've got it Australian registered, it's Australian registered for life. So that's the first hurdle. And if you don't start that at least 3 months before you're going to leave, you'll probably won't have it done by the time you want to leave. And you can't leave Australia without it, because the Australian Border Force has to issue you with a clearance certificate, an outward clearance when you leave, that you'll have to show in the other countries when you arrive. And if you can't show that, they literally won't let you enter their country. So it's not an option to leave without this. You have to have it. So important to make sure you've got that Australian registration. The next thing is insurance, and this is becoming every year more and more of a hurdle. You will find that there's only a very small amount of insurers that will offer to insure you for blue water ocean cruising. And they will have some quite extraordinary conditions and requirements for you to do that. And those conditions and requirements will be matched with an equally extraordinary premium for providing the insurance. To give you an example, if you were having a $250,000 boat that you wanted to insure to go offshore for a season like this, you would probably expect the premium to be at least double what you're paying for your local insurance now. So if you were paying $2,500 a year to insure your vessel, you can expect that you'll pay an extra $2,500 for the premium to go blue water. And then they'll put requirements on as to your experience level, and they may even require you to have experienced crew on board. So before you get all excited about doing this, those are the two major things that you should first look into is A, have I got Australian registration, and B, can I get insurance? The next thing will be preparing the vessel and the crew for the ocean passage making. And there's some courses that you can do to help you do that. We find that the majority of people that do our rally, when they get to the other side, have said, wow, I didn't know what I didn't know. I can't believe I've been sailing all my life, but I didn't realize this multi-day and night ocean passage making and long-term cruising, how much was involved. So with that in mind, we created an offshore cruising preparation course that details our own experience and all the mistakes that we've made and all the things that we've learned, and then those that have been learnt by others along the way, and created these courses which you're able to do online. We've got it 10 one-hour sessions, video courses that are specific about preparing your vessel and crew for extended coastal passage making and or blue water passage making. And that's all part of what we offer if you became a Downunder Rally member. Thanks, Vic. So if you're interested in having a look at those courses and beginning the process, we talk about everything in there: Australian registration, insurance, short-handed rigging for the boat, anchoring, everything that you need to know. How much anchor chain should you have? How deep can you expect to be anchoring in? Water makers, do you need one? Are you going to be able to get water where you want it, when you want it? And if you can't, is that going to restrict your cruising experience, which it will? There's a lot of places where you're just not going to be able to go ashore and get potable water, and that could mean that you're having to sail 80 miles back to wherever it was you started from or further to get to a place where you can fill your water tanks. Charging systems, it's incredible how many people at the end of their first passage say, wow, I didn't realize the boat's going to use this much power. I haven't been able to keep my batteries up. I didn't realize that just 2 or 3 extra people on board plugging in laptops and iPads and phones and charging these things because they're watching movies at night and stuff, how much extra demand that put on the batteries, let alone the autopilot running 24/7 and the navigation lights and chart plotters and so forth and so on. So there is a lot to do to make sure that the boat is well prepared and the crew are well prepared. So again, if you're interested, you can scan that or go to our website and you'll be able to get access to all that really valuable information. Thanks, Vic. If you want to see some videos of past participants on our rallies and what they've had to say and what they experienced, or videos from people who have created their own stories about their blue water cruising experiences, leaving Australia and heading offshore, we've got a whole video library on our YouTube channel that you can go in there and have a look at no cost, as often as you like, and see just what people have shared and what their experience was like. Thanks. And we publish a monthly sailing magazine, which is called Ahoy Sailing, which is again free to subscribe to. And we've got articles and information in there about cruising and sailing and cruising in Australia and the Southwest Pacific that you'll find entertaining, if not informative and interesting. So you're welcome to jump on and subscribe to Ahoy and receive that in your email every month. If you decide you'd like to make the voyage with us as part of the Go East Rally, it's our goal to provide those who join the rally with the opportunity to voyage in company, and we provide our participants with a wide range of information, support and benefits, both before you leave, whilst you're on passage and when you've arrived. We've got the Go East Rally heading off again next year after a 3-year hiatus, and we're just trying to work out the route now. There is 2 routes that we're thinking of sailing, and some of those will, which route we sail or whether we actually run 2 rallies and sail both routes, we're just working out now with the officials from Vanuatu and New Caledonia. But we'll definitely be going, and we'll definitely be going from Australia to New Caledonia and onwards to Vanuatu in 2023. So if you're up for an adventure, jump onto our website under the Go East Rally and you can find out more about that, and you can submit an expression of interest obligation free, and that will mean that you'll get all the updates from us and information as it comes to hand. So if after you've done New Caledonia and Vanuatu and you're keen to extend the adventure and get further out and see Fiji and Tonga and even Tahiti, then the way to do that is to pop down to New Zealand, which we've done ourselves, and spend the summer cruising in New Zealand, which is a joy in itself, and then prepare the boat and get ready to head off out into the further east into the Pacific and more experiences. And the best people to tell you about doing that is our friends from Island Cruising Association, and in particular Viki Moore, who's patiently waiting for her turn to chat. So I'll hand off to Viki now and say thank you all, and I'm here for questions afterwards.
Thanks, John, and thanks very much, Susanna, for organising this evening. It's lovely to be there, even though I am in Christchurch, New Zealand. So it's lovely to be in Sydney as well at the same time. So nice to see you all, and thanks for coming along. So as John mentioned and Susanna introduced, I'm Viki from Island Cruising. Island Cruising's been around for about 30 years, organising yacht rallies to the Pacific since the 1980s, and I purchased the business last year. I'm the 5th owner of the business, and very proud to be continuing on the legacy of everyone that's gone before me. I'm a keen sailor. I've been sailing all my life. I'm a director of Yachting New Zealand, founder of Women Who Sail New Zealand. As along with John, I'm a regional rear commodore for the Ocean Cruising Club, and of course keen rally organizer as well. So it's great to be here. So similar to Downunder Rally, we operate in a very similar way with our 2 businesses, and we work very closely together. So we also have a membership option, and we do weekly workshops with our members, which are mainly based around the Cat 1 safety regulations, the Yachting New Zealand Cat 1 safety regulations. So New Zealand registered vessels need to meet a certain safety standard to be able to leave the country. And a lot of what we focus on is based on those regulations and helping our members work their way through the regulations. So we have 2 sort of levels of membership. One is just the members who are participating with these workshops under their own steam. And then the rally participants get extra content just to help them work their way through more quickly through the process. We also produce a monthly magazine like John's Ahoy, and ours is called the Cruise News. So it's also a free magazine. If you'd like to join up, you can sign up on our rally. And this is a photo of that I took of one of the participants in the Beachcomber Pirates Day in Fiji last month that I was up for. So which was a great day, was had by all, I can rest assured you. So once you arrive in New Zealand from the Pacific, and you can, a lot of cruisers choose to stay in Northland. There's lots of beautiful sailing around the Northland area, the Hauraki Gulf, the Bay of Islands and that kind of thing. But we also run a South Island rally. So we've got about 23 boats at present signed up to go around the South Island. They're going to be doing a clockwise rotation of the South Island this time around, and they'll be finishing up in Littleton for the Sail GP event in March next year, which I'm also involved in organising. But just to give you a bit of a taste of what it looks like cruising around the South Island, it's a really diverse landscape. So this is up in the Abel Tasman. They've got beautiful golden sandy beaches, crystal clear waters, really warm, lots of beautiful walking tracks, and great cruising around Abel Tasman. Across to Marlborough Sounds, where the forest reaches just straight down to the ocean, really deep anchorages where you can all raft up together, and secluded bays. This is Port Resolution, just around the corner from Ship's Cove, one of Captain Cook's favourite haunts back in his day. Beautiful place to go cruising. Lots and lots of territory there. I think it's about 12% of New Zealand's coastline is in the Marlborough Sounds area. This is a bit further down into the Sounds, another one of my favourite anchorages in Governor's Bay. Another beautiful, gorgeous sheltered spot. And then down to Fiordland. So this photo was taken by one of the boats on the South Island Rally last year, Tony Whiting. You might have heard of Whiting Design Boats and Penny Whiting, his sister. So Tony's a very famous boat builder, and took some beautiful pictures whilst he was down there. This is one of the majestic fjords, Dusky or Doubtful or something. I can't remember which one it is, but beautiful scenery, incredible destinations down there. This is another picture of another boat taken with a drone from the Fiordland on their adventures. And then down to Stewart Island, which also has beautiful golden sandy beaches and crystal clear waters. It's a little bit colder though than probably you're used to in Australia or in your Sydney beaches, but we certainly still have the golden sandy beaches down in this part of the world. There's another view of Stewart Island, and you can see this is my friend's boat here, Stranick. They've got shorelines tying themselves into the trees there to stop themselves swinging around if the weather changes. So they're snugged right into a nice cozy little bay there. Then we go in May, similar to what John was talking about, where they leave to go to New Caledonia and Vanuatu. Our rally heads up to Tonga first and then across to Fiji. This year we've had about 35 boats up in Fiji, and we've picked up a few extra international cruisers who are going to join us, come back to New Zealand. When we set off, Tonga was closed, Vanuatu was closed, New Caledonia was just talking about opening. So these people that went on our rally were just going to spend the season in Fiji. Since the other places have opened, a few more of them have headed across to Vanuatu and New Caledonia, and at present most of them are on their way home, and I'm constantly checking the Predict Wind tracker to see where they're at and make sure they're all heading in the right direction, or at least towards New Zealand. They haven't turned back and decided to go home. But the weather's a bit challenging at the moment, but we have a professional weather router, an Australian actually, Bruce Buckley, who helps me with the weather, and also John and I both use a guy called Peter Mott, who is our passage guardian, and he keeps track of all the vessels for us whilst they're on passage, which is very reassuring for the rally organisers, but also the people on the boats too. So this is just a little snapshot of the colouring in that we've been doing in the South Pacific of the boats that I took this one earlier today. So you can see the boats that are heading home. There's a few more that have set off this afternoon. So our typical route would be from New Zealand to Tonga, then across to Fiji, and we try to get a Lao group entry so that you can experience the Lao group without having to sail past it to check in and then cruise 200 miles back upwind again to get to the Lao group. So that's something that we're going to be offering next year as well. From there, people can spend, as John said, you can spend months and months in Fiji and still not see it all. But if people want to experience different cultures and things, then they can carry on up to Vanuatu and on to New Caledonia. And we're hoping to do some combined activities with Island Cruising and Downunder Rally in Vanuatu and New Caledonia next year to catch up with each other along the way. And from there, you can either join the Go West Rally to head back to Australia with John, or back to New Zealand. You might like to do French Polynesia the following year, which was also a little bit easier to do from when you're starting in New Zealand, and catch those westerlies out to French Polynesia too. So our rallies are very flexible. We're here to help support your cruising dreams, and that includes all sorts of bits and pieces. So we do the pre-trip departure training, assistance with getting you and your boat and your crew ready for the adventures ahead. We help out with all the documentation and entry formalities. We can help you with crew, getting crew on and off the boat. We've got some great discounts with our sponsors. We get weather advice, can give you local knowledge when you get to the other end. Peter Mott, our passage guardian, as I mentioned before, keeping an eye on everybody for us. Our exclusive rally entry ports, which include the Lao group. We have social events and activities, lots of opportunities to get together with the other rally participants, particularly if you've got families and things like that. Everyone likes to sort of travel together or head off and do their own things, but then get back together and socialise again. And then advice and support if things don't go to plan. And we've had a few of those over the last few months, and since I've been running the rally, there's definitely been times where people have been really reassured to be able to pick up the phone, to talk to me, and just be able to, I can sort stuff out and they can focus on dealing with the problems that they've got. I can deal with looking after the boat and getting them sorted and underway. It's just nice to have that support at the other end of the line sometimes. So what can you see when you go cruising? This is some beautiful shots of some of the rally pictures from this season. So of course you got the beautiful Lao group up in Fiji, some gorgeous sunny tropical remote islands, and you can really find a little place to tuck away for yourself. But as John mentioned earlier, a lot of the value that you get out of joining a rally is meeting the locals. And this is my friend Martin on a boat called Champagne, and he was able to go into this Fijian village and help them fix their water pump, which had been broken for about a month. He happened to have the tools and spare parts on board, and was able to fix the water pump so that the families didn't have to lug their water for 2 kilometers each way or something like that. So so that was a nice story, and as you can see, everyone's very, very happy. Everyone's so friendly in Fiji, and they really are gracious hosts and very welcoming of yachties that kind of head their way. There is also a cultural protocol that John mentioned in New Caledonia with the Kanak culture. The Fijians have a sebu protocol. So again, once you anchor, you need to go ashore and offer a gift of kava root and be welcomed into the village. And once you've been welcomed, you are literally part of the family and treated as such. So they're very, very friendly people, and everyone's had a wonderful time in Fiji catching up with them. Going to church, this is my friend Vaughan, who was away cruising on one of the boats as crew. He got dressed up in his Sulu, and they even fitted him out with a tie, and the kids took him on their Sunday best to church, and he said he forgot to take a water bottle, and after about 2.5 hours he thought he was going to faint with the heat, but he said the singing was incredible and an experience not to be missed. And then, of course, there's get-togethers, sundowners with your fellow rally participants on beautiful beaches, just catching up with people who are all heading in your direction, keeping an eye out for one another, you know, celebrating when people arrive in Fiji as well. This was some of the later arrivals being welcomed by some of the guys that got up there a few weeks earlier, which was a really, really fun night. And then you can disappear and you have some time on your own as well. So there's no obligation to be cruising and socializing with the group all the time. You can go and experience your own little slice of paradise on your own. And of course, there's great snorkeling and fishing and beach combing, walks, cultural activities, more fishing, and more socializing and getting together and experiencing some of the sites. Tonga is open for business at last. They've been desperately wanting cruisers to come back. So next year we will be offering Tonga as a destination, and the plan will be to stop over at Minerva Reef on the way up to Tonga, which is right on the ley line up to Tonga, which is another really precious and special place to be able to visit. And we're not 100% sure what we're going to experience in Tonga since the volcano eruption and the tsunami, and then 2 years or 2.5 years of COVID lockdown. The people are really struggling. So we're looking forward to getting back up there and hopefully being able to do some community projects and spend some New Zealand dollars up there to help support their economy. And we're looking to be in Tonga for about 6 weeks to 2 months before we take the hop across to Fiji. And the plan will be to check in at Vanuatu, which you can hopefully see there on the right-hand side in the yellow in the Northern Lao group. So we'll fly all the officials out to Vanuatu, and everyone will be able to, on the rally, will be able to check in there and then explore this really remote part of Fiji. It really is a special place over there, and the only way you can go and visit it really is by cruising there. There's no hotels, there's no shops, there's no restaurants or anything like that. So you've really got to take your own boat.
Hey, Viki, excuse
yes.
me. Can you just reiterate there why that's so important from the trade wind perspective? How hard it is to get back there if you don't stop there on the way?
Yes, absolutely, John. Good point. So of course, as John mentioned before, the southeast trade winds blow pretty strong all year round through this region. So for people who don't check in at Vanuatu, you have to sail 200 nautical miles past there into Savu. Savu is the closest place that you can check into. And once you get to Savu, it's very difficult to get a weather window to work your way back upwind again to get back across to this particular area. So you can easily lose like a couple of weeks by sailing past, checking in, reprovisioning, figuring out where you need to go, working your way back up probably around the north of Taveuni, and then waiting for the weather to get you back down to Vanuatu. So you sort of lose all that time. So the real benefit of the Rally group check-ins, and John does this as well in the Loyalty Islands in New Caledonia, is that you can save so much time and so much effort with having to bash your way back up to get to some of these really precious gems that otherwise would be quite difficult to get to. So
because the only two ports of entry there are Savu and Nandi, right?
Yes, correct. So Lautoka and Nandi you can check in, and Savu. Yeah, at present those are the only places you can go into.
So trying to sail back over there to the east from those two places, especially if it was Lautoka or Nandi, I mean, it's very, very difficult.
Absolutely, yeah. So this area through here is can get quite rough. I don't know if you've heard of Cook Strait here. It's probably the same as your Bass Strait in Australia. Maybe not quite so bad. It's a bit warmer, but it's strong sort of winds and currents through this area. So making the crossing, especially against the wind, back up this way is quite difficult. So by starting over here in the east and working your way west, or whichever way you decide to do it, there's plenty of different options. It's heaps easier to start over this way and work your way back across that way and take advantage of those southeast trade winds as you can, if you can. A lot of the Kiwis that sailed up this year came over here and checked in at Denarau and Vunda, and they've spent most of their time up in the Yasawas and Mamanuka group. So this is where a lot of the tourist resorts and stuff are, and it's, there's lots of bars and restaurants, nice anchorages. It's kind of sheltered over this side because it's in the lee of the island. There's some quite big mountains in here, so there's a nice kind of sheltered patch there. So some of the boats have been pretty, had a really good look around this area, and it's nice, easy cruising and stuff around here. This is all a bit more remote, lots of really interesting history, very people living sort of very much as they have done for hundreds and hundreds of years. Yeah, interesting place, Fiji. Really, again, these people, my people have been there for about 5 months, and they have literally only just scratched the surface. So you could spend an entire season looking around up there if you wish. But that's pretty much it from my side of things. So we've, yeah, almost the same. My boats are on the way back, and I've got quite a few planning now to head back down to New Zealand and planning to head back up specifically for next year. So we look forward to hopefully you guys joining us at some stage as well, but probably just hand over to you, Susanna, for any questions.
Thank you very much, Viki and John. It was, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Especially for me, I feel like, oh, we'll just go. We've got a few issues with the child at school still, but then we might head off. But it was really, really interesting, and I don't know if anyone has any questions or would like to ask them something. Yep. So the question is, the Australian registration for the boat, does that then remain with the boat, or does it stay with the owner?
Yes, thanks, Susanna. Yes, it does. It remains with the boat. So it's you can buy a boat that's already got Australian registration and save a lot of the hassle. But if you've already got your boat and it isn't, then it will become part of the boat and often is considered an asset.
Cool. So you should have asked about that when you bought the boat.
Well, yeah.
Do they always have a person giving them the weather reports from offshore somewhere that's looking at the whole weather syndrome for the direction that they're cruising to?
So the question was, if you have a person who's looking for the weather all over to help the cruisers, would you do that? Don't you, both of you?
Yeah. So from
weather,
our perspective,
weather gurus.
No, yeah, from our perspective, it's both a little different what Viki does and we do, but whilst the vessels are underway in the ocean, we have a professional weather router, just as Viki does, that is monitoring both the weather and their progress and sending daily email updates to the vessels. It's quite interesting when a group of boats leave together, it can be a short matter of 12 hours and they can't see each other. And another 24 hours, and quite often they're outside of VHF radio communications because some are doing different speeds, some have chosen to take different courses. So 3 days into a passage, the boats can be 24 hours apart, and that can mean that each boat's experiencing different weather conditions. So the weather router is particular about monitoring the progress of the boats and then working out what weather they can expect for the next few days based on their progress. And that could mean he sends them off in a different direction to avoid a system or sail around a system. But look, typically, and why we like to leave from the Gold Coast to go to New Caledonia, short passage distances. Our goal is to be in the ocean for the shortest amount of time possible. We can choose our weather based on what is quite reliable 3, maybe 4 days, but definitely 3 days. The first 3 days we'll get that right, and the next 3 days, it'll be pretty close to right because we've been watching it and doing it for some time. Once you start getting the longer passages going direct from Australia to Fiji, 1,600 miles and 12, 14 days, you're really, you're in the laps of the gods. So, and look, we also spend a lot of time educating people how to understand their weather and get their own weather with satellite communications and using the Predict Wind offshore app and the Iridium Go connectivity. It's a requirement of entering our rally that people have got satellite connectivity and Iridium access to Predict Wind's offshore app and weather. And we spend time training them how to use that and what to look out for. So you've got to be a bit resourceful and a bit independent and combine that with the support that we provide so that redundancy is the key thing. If for some reason you can't get access to the emails or something happens, and you've got to be able to look after yourself as well.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that too, John. So we have a professional weather router who sends daily emails, and my boats are all over the place at the moment. So it's a big job for him. But yeah, it's great having a professional keeping an eye on what's going on, and they definitely look at that bigger picture that can sometimes be a bit hard to see yourself when you're downloading stuff on your Iridium Go. But we do a lot of training with people about that. But I guess at the end of the day, as what I sort of say to my guys is, you know, expect the best, but prepare for the worst, because particularly on the passage from New Zealand to Fiji and back again, it's a long way, and you're at least 7 days at sea, and so you're likely at some stage to get one of those fronts coming through, and so you've just got to be ready to deal with it.
Cool. Thank you very much for that. Anyone else? Yes?
Based on the
So the question is based on as well the weather and how many people you deal with. Is there a maximum to each one of your rallies of amount of participants?
You go, Vic.
So on mine, no, there's not a maximum number, and we'll just be flexible with the people that come along. So no maximum.
From our perspective, we cap it at 40 boats. And if that means we need to run 2 sailing dates, so the first group of boats will leave and get underway, and then we'll start preparing for the second fleet of boats to go. But we find that ourselves and the people that we're working with can, you know, competently manage 40. It starts to get a bit wild after that.
Thank you.
I've got a slightly complicated question.
Okay, this is not the first time we've heard about your rallies, and actually 2 of our members did the 2019 one, I'm pretty sure, and people may remember they had actually different experiences. One had a brilliant effort, went across to New, had a marvellous time, a good trip across, went up to Vanuatu, spent about another 3 months up there, came back to Australia vowing to do it all over again. And they were a fairly experienced group, and they'd done similar trips before. The other group had a truly terrible experience. When they got to New, one of them got off the boat, got on a plane straight back to Australia, swore never to do it again. And they both came and talked to us. They're both our members. They both came to talk to us on different dates here. Some people may remember it was after 2019. My takeaway was probably level of experience, level of preparation and expectations. Would either of you like to elaborate on that?
Yes, I would, because I'm pretty sure I know who you're talking about. And it was interesting in 2019, we were delayed quite a while for weather, waiting for the best window that we could get to go. And we instructed everyone to sail a route when we left, and that route saw us sailing south, quite a ways south first, before heading off towards New Caledonia to get some angle in for what was coming. Unfortunately, one of the boats broke down in the seaway as we were leaving, and Southport Seaway, and I stayed back and was assisting that boat, and the remainder of the fleet headed off, and they got rumline fever. And they were excited, and they were completely disregarded the route that we were supposed to be sailing and just headed rumline straight to New Caledonia. Despite our best efforts to convince them not to do that, they said, "Oh no, it's lovely out here. It's all good. We can do it." But they were sailing to the weather, not to what was coming. And about 3 days in, they realized their folly, and they started to try and beat to windward to get some south in. But it was too late. They were on the wind, hard on the wind, in a confused sea for several days. Those that followed the suggested route certainly had a more pleasant passage.
And I'll comment on that as well, actually. And you're right, it's all about people's sort of appetite for being at sea. And I had a group that went up in May, and they had what everyone was calling the perfect weather window. They just sailed directly on one tack from Opua to Savu Savu, and they made it in like a record time, like 6 days or something. And most of the boats got off and said, "That was the best trip ever. We just had the most amazing time." And one of the women got off, and she was just like, that was the worst trip ever. That was way too fast. We were going far too fast, and we didn't even, it was just too quickly, and the wind was just too strong, and it was just like right up behind them the whole way. And as I say, they didn't even have to tack once, but it's all to do with people's, as you say, their expectation and what they think they're going to get versus what actually happens. And of course, on your first time on a big ocean crossing, it might not be what you expect.
So the question is, can you tell us which insurers do insure the blue water cruising? Would you be able to disclose that, or?
Oh yeah, for sure. In our part of the world, and it is interesting to know that there's differences in different parts of the world. An Australian insurance company can't insure a foreign flagged vessel, for instance. So there's that limits it greatly, and an offshore insurance company can't insure a foreign flagged vessel. So there are insurers that offer this insurance, but if you're an Australian vessel, some of those insurers aren't able to provide cover for Australian flagged vessels. And it's all to do with government regulations around collecting GST and stamp duty. So in Australia, we've got Pantaenius is one of the insurers that provides blue water cover. I believe Topsail also will consider it, and Nautilus will consider it. They're the main three players. Typically Club Marine and some of those, the more mainstream, the more well-known insurers that cover your coastal cruising don't get into the blue water sphere. They sort of say, oh yeah, we'll do it for you, and then they quote themselves out of it because they really don't want to have it, or they put massive excesses in place to, basically show their disinterest.
I found the same thing. I found it really hard, like getting insurance for the boats on the Rally this year, and I was like, why is this so difficult? But it's definitely something that you want to get onto early, and they sometimes make you jump through the most ridiculous hoops to get a policy, and then as I say, the excesses can be super high, and they're not covering this, that, and the other thing, and you're like, what's the point of having this policy if you're not going to cover us for the things that we need to be covered for? So insurance is hard.
We have a broker we're working closely with up here called Helm Insurance, HELM. You can find their details on our website in the partner directory, and he's having some great success with affordable premiums through Nautilus with reasonable conditions and criterias. So yeah, we'd be suggesting you have a chat to him.
Cool. Thank you very much. Anyone else? So the question was if the Australian boats need a Cat 1, as you mentioned, Viki, the New Zealand boats needs a Cat 1. Do the Australian boats need that, or is it just a good to have? I mean, in my book, we should have it, but
yeah. So you don't need to have the Cat 1 certificate if you're an Australian registered or any international registered vessel in New Zealand. So it's only New Zealand registered vessels that need to have the Cat 1 certificate. But a lot of what we do focuses on the Cat 1 safety regulations, and some people in New Zealand decide to register their boats offshore to try and get around having to get this Cat 1 certificate. But John can probably attest to this too. Like after running a yacht rally and seeing all the things that break on people's boats, you understand why we have these regulations and why they want people to have storm sails and drogues and all the safety gear and that kind of stuff. So whilst sometimes Cat 1 seems extreme, it is really the gold standard in terms of safety equipment and having your boat really well prepared to go offshore. So if I was you, I'd be aiming to get my boat to that level of safety.
Yeah, absolutely. If you could Australian register your Sabo, you'd be able to sail it to New Caledonia. You'd be able to get a outward clearance here. And that's the reality of it. And sadly, people aren't being forced to assess their boats and their crew well enough before they head off.
All that, Evan? Does it include having the HF radio?
No, so an HF radio is an option for Cat 1. So you need to have some form of satellite communications or an SSB radio that can download emails and weather. So you've just basically got to have some way of getting weather on board. So if it's an SSB or a satellite phone or whatever, it's got to be some sort of forms of communication for offshore.
Anyone else?
Some sort of rule of thumb on budget to have for putting the boat aside for doing
So the question is, what kind of budget would you recommend people have? What's the ballpark of a budget? Not mentioning the cost of the boat, of course, but the rest.
What are your thoughts, John?
It depends on the boat, I'm afraid. You know, if you've been fortunate enough to buy a boat that somebody's already invested the money in, that's blue water ready, and it's got the water makers and it's got the satellite comms and it's got, you know, all the things that go with being ocean ready, then your outlay is going to be a lot less than the other. But, you know, think of things like water makers, autopilots, self-steering gear, communication equipments, you know, sail configurations, storm sails, having the correct amount of reefing points in the mainsail, and short-handed, you know, capabilities with how things are set up. You know, again, and I sound like I'm trying to sell stuff, and maybe I am, but that offshore cruising preparation course of ours has been looked at by well over 800 people now, and we're encouraging people before they buy the boat to look at it and identify what sort of things they're going to need to find in a boat to save them having to buy one and then completely refit it to make it offshore ready. It'll be the best $125 you've spent, and it will give you an idea of just what you're going to be up for. We've had people turn around and sell their boats and buy something that's already been outfitted because of the cost of outfitting what they had. So, yeah.
And I guess in terms of a budget for sort of like once you get up to the islands, it really depends on what kind of sailing you do. So we've got people in sort of like 60-foot sort of almost super yachts, you know, and another couple that are in a steel 35-foot boat, you know, who are really doing it on a budget. So if you're going to the resorts and drinking cocktails and going on dive trips, then your budget is obviously a lot bigger than if you're heading to the market and catching your fish. So it is possible to, you know, just be on the anchor, catching a few fish and buying your fruit and veggies from the local villages and live very, you know, frugally versus, as I say, you know, renting cars and hanging out in Dinnerau Marina and going to the restaurants and stuff like that there. So, yeah, it really depends on your type of sailing and what kind of things you want to do. But you can go to places like the Lau Group. You can't spend any money because there's no shops, so it's very cheap there.
Better spend the money beforehand so they have something to eat.
Exactly. That's right. Yeah.
Anyone else? Or we done? That's it. I think that was it for questions. I must say thank you very much for coming along, even if it was on Zoom. So next time you're in Sydney, let us know, and we'll definitely get together and say hello in person. And John, I will have a chat about you about the international cruises that we might have visiting us, and everyone goes, we're going to have a good time welcoming them here to the club. So definitely work something out there. So
well, that would be wonderful to have them, some ambassadors there to meet them down there and you know, really turn it on for them, let them understand what a great country we've got.
Yeah, we'll definitely email about that and get that moving as well. So that'd be
awesome.
Very good. Thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you, folks.
Thanks so much. Have a good evening.
Thanks so much.
Nice. See you, Vic.
See you later. Cheers, John. See you.
Bye.
Bye.